it's going to be time to put the augers back on. Don't forget the small washers. One goes on each side here. Next, I'm just going to coat a bit of grease on the shaft on both sides. Next, you want to make sure that the bushings here, these little plastic things, aren't all worn out. This one was there previously and it's finished, so I'm just going to reinsert one with a bit of grease around it. And you do that on both augers. Now when you put the augers back on the shaft, you want to make sure that the roundish part here goes on the inside near the gearbox, and the outer side is opened up like this. What this does is it keeps the augers blowing the snow in the proper direction. You can see that they're pointing in toward the impeller. So we're just going to insert this auger in. Watch the little bushing here, sometimes it pops out. And you've got to put it back in, just like that. I'm going to put the shear pin in just so that it keeps the auger in place. When you install your shear pins, you want to leave a bit of loose like that. The reason for that is if the bolt's too tight, it puts too much pressure on the shaft and the pin may not break when it should. So now I've got that all installed, ready to go. Next, I'm going to turn my attention to the auger housing. Usually when I take out an auger, I take out these bolts here during the process. And what it does is it removes this bushing here from each side. You can see there's another one there, but it kind of broke out of its place. So at this point I have to remove them. So these are 1/2 inch, by the way. So there's the bushing, and there's actually a plastic bushing that goes in here. It's missing on this one. There is one here. That's what it looks like. So now I have to remove the one on the other side. Sometimes even when you put a new bushing in here, there can be a lot of loose between the plastic and the metal part of the bushing. What I do is I grab a pair of vice grips and I just slightly squeeze it like this. What it does is it tightens up the metal and the bushing goes in tighter. And just do it all around. Then the plastic bushing will go in nice and tight. Before you insert the bushings, don't forget your thin washers here. One goes here. And it's the same thing on the other side. Now we're ready to install it in the blower. Now it's going to be time to install the augers, but before you do that, you may want to check this bearing here to make sure that it's not worn out. This one's still good. If this is worn out, what can happen is it can throw the pulleys off, the auger pulleys. Your belts are going to keep derailing and possibly breaking. So this one's good, and we're going to go ahead. So what you need to do now at this point is to insert all the augers with the bushings on the end and the back of the impeller shaft to go through that bearing hole right at the back over here. So you want it in like this, and then you're going to insert the whole thing. Make sure nothing comes apart. Push it back. Once you've got it in, try to line up the back of the impeller shaft through that bearing. And there we go, it's in. And this is the back end of the impeller shaft. It did go through the bearing, that's good. Next, what you need to do is to line up these holes here on the bushing with the holes on the outside here and put those bolts in. So what you can do is you turn the bushing over until you see the holes line up. So once they're in, just tighten them up. So you can see that it's well bolted there, and now just repeat the process on this side. Once you've got all the bushings tightened up on both sides, just flip the auger housing forward. So now that you've got the blower flipped over like this, you want to insert this part here with these knobs here sticking up. Push it down. Next, you want to install your pulleys. if you got them mixed up, this is how they go. Usually the rusty part faces the blower, and the embossed part here goes up. So you would put this one first like that. You'll have to push this lever open just to free up this part here. Put it on like that. Next, you want to insert this part. Now if you've mixed them up, the embossed part goes in the center, so just remember both embossed parts meet. Just insert it like that. Make sure you've got both washers on your bolt. Now this is a 1/2 inch bolt. Now we're ready to tighten it up. Just hold it with your hands. If you can't hold it while you're tightening it, just block the impeller with a piece of wood. Insert your auger belts on before we install this back on. So start by pushing on the belt tensioner to release the brake, and insert one belt on the bottom groove. Now you can release the belt tensioner, and now you can put the second belt just so that it's ready. So at this point here, we're ready to reassemble the front auger system to the back end of the blower. What you're going to need to do is to line up these 3 bolts on each side. There's actually 6 altogether to these holes here. So there's 3 here to match the bolts over on the auger system. And I've still got my blower leaning on that stool, which is really going to help. So you can see that the holes are starting to line up. You want to make sure that they're lining up on both sides. Once you've got it going in like this, which requires hardly any effort if you do it right. Once you've got it in, just put on a nut. This will make sure that the whole thing doesn't separate on you. The next thing you want to make sure of is that the belts are still lined up on that pulley over there. Once you know the belts are on okay, you can insert them over the pulleys, just like that. Now before we go too far, we have to hook up this auger cable here to this belt tensioner here. There's a groove in there. So just like we took it off with a pair of needle nose pliers, I'm going to put it back on with a pair of needle nose pliers. There it's in now. So I'm just going to push on the auger to make sure it's working, and that's good. So all of that looks